The Power and Control Tactics of the Victimized. This is the title of this message today. The Power and Control Tactics of the Victimized. Do you mean to tell me that victims will use the very same tactics, if not more, that the abusers use? Absolutely. The victimized wants to feel powerful again. Of course, they can't use these tactics on their abusers. So what do? They go to people who are in the household that aren't the abusers, that aren't the users. They'll go outside of the household. They'll deal with people at the workplace or outside the workplace who they feel they can exhibit power and control over. So the victimized goes out, ends up meeting someone, for instance, and that individual who doesn't know the history of the abuse that the victim has gone through ends up being ensnared in this trap where now the victim is being bossy, being controlling, being emotionally and physically abusive to a new victim. Okay? The victimized wants to feel in control. The victimized wants to feel empowered. Those individuals who I grew up around who were powerless decided to exhibit their power that they did feel they had, what they felt they could control over those who were least educated, who didn't have much money, who had their share of self-esteem issues, who had been once victims of abusers and users, but then those abusers and users either died or the victims ended up getting away from them, so they turned into survivors, only to meet victims or stay attached to victims of abusers and users, and now they're getting caught back up into the web of foolishness. Sometimes you have parents who have gone through this with their exes or with their currents, and the children see the tactics and then they use those same tactics on the parent or the grandparent or whoever they feel that they can get the upper hand on. That's why with some of these elders, they end up being abused. After all I did for these kids, and then they turn around and they abuse me. Remember, they saw you when you were younger. They saw the power and control tactics that were either used on you or you used on someone else. And so now what goes around comes back around. I see how daddy controlled mom. So now I'm going to control daddy in the way that he was controlling mom. And see, some of these users and abusers, they see this being repeated, and quite naturally, they don't like it because it's being done to them. Okay? And some of these victims, they, of course, don't want to be abused, but they still remain in these crazy-making relationships. So for some of them, their sanity is in going out and abusing others. I know, crazy, isn't it? I watched this sort of thing once again play out. And what I saw in a particular relationship between the mother and daughter was this. The mother who had been abused, the daughter shows up and decides to use power and control tactics to get the mother to do what she wanted, when she wanted, how she wanted. So if the mother wanted the daughter to do something, no, it's when I feel like it or when I feel it's convenient. Okay. But when the daughter wanted something from the mother, there was the guilt trips. There was, well, I'm not going to do this for you if you don't do this for me. There was some petty behaviors. There was some throwing back up in the mother's face, things that she did for others. I mean, there was so many tactics used to get the mother to pretty much bow down at the daughter's feet. Okay. There were those individuals who I saw who the husbands were very abusive, very controlling. And so the wives would end up exhibiting some of those same tactics on the children. So if she was yelled at later on that day, rest assured she was going to yell at her daughter. If she was disrespected in some way by the husband or the boyfriend or what have you, then she was going to be disrespectful toward the son. And some of them did it without thinking, because they were so used to being disrespected, mistreated, controlled, that they would be this way with their children and call it strict parenting. And we know better, right? There were those individuals even in the workplace who you knew that the wife was a bossy wife, right? So here there's the a husband who has this corporation that's doing quite well, but the very mean-spirited behaviors that he experienced at home, he was exhibiting some of that at the workplace. And of course, people are only going to take but so much, so you would have some good employees ending up leaving. I'm not going to put up with this. This is crazy. I don't know who he thinks he is. I'm not his wife, you see. Sometimes the admins, and the secretaries, they ended up getting the bulk of this because they work closely with these managers. And so that's why in some of these organizations, there is the high turnover, because some people just don't know how to separate their personal life from their professional life. Okay? So the victims turn right around and they end up being this way once they get their businesses, because they've been around a controlling boss. They've been around the abusive coworkers. They've experienced their share of traumas and dramas, right? So rather than get the necessary help and find a more productive way of dealing with challenges, instead they use, once again, power and control. Here are some more examples. So you don't like what somebody is doing. Rather than confront them, talk to them in a respectful manner, you decide that you're just not going to speak to them. So you use silent treatment. Where did you learn that? Who did you grow up around? Who were you influenced by? Who did you used to work with? Okay? Okay? This is going to step on some people's toes. When an individual is just not meeting tasks in the way they should, you've given them these lists of what they're supposed to do, and they're not working on the projects, or they're ignoring them, or they're doing them in ways that are not right. Rather than sit down and talk to them about it, instead you go and you start bad-mouthing that particular worker to someone else. I can't stand him. He never does anything right. And you may even do it within earshot in the hopes that the person is going to correct their behavior. The cowards, the ones who don't like confrontation of any sort, they're going to go ahead, they'll overhear, and then they'll fix some things. Others won't. Instead, excuse me, what did you just say? That would be a functional, healthy way to respond. If somebody is talking about you and they want to get some attention, you're going to get some attention, all right, because you should have sat down and had a professional conversation with me, you see. And meanwhile, trace back and you'll find that the individual experienced something like this growing up in a household where mom was talking to all the siblings about that one over there that doesn't do things in the way that he should or she should. And rather than sit down and have that dialogue and say, this is how I want this done, they want to just gossip and badmouth and say whatever about their own children. Okay? These small things become bigger things and show up in relationships, show up at the workplace, show up in so many different places. And we don't always recognize, how is it that this person is behaving this way? Or are we dealing with a survivor, or are we still dealing with a victim? And oftentimes we're still dealing with victims who claim to be survivors. Survivors are going to deal with things in a healthy way, in a functional way. They're going to continue to go through the process of healing. But victims are going to act as if they are functional and logical and reasonable human beings, but we know better. Okay? The victim who is used to being told what to do on any given day by the husband will be that way toward her children. He doesn't talk politely, kindly. She doesn't talk politely, kindly. She may attempt to, but then something is triggered, and the next thing you know, she is yelling and cursing just as her partner does to her. Okay? There are those times where if there is the attitude in the household because the man of the house has showed up and nobody is scattering, nobody is running, okay, he's got this presence of power like a rhino going to a a water hole, and everybody, all these animals are leaving, and they're not doing it when he wants. Guess what? He's going to what? He's going to be physical. He's going to act ugly. Well, that victim who's used to running, right? Every time, the king of the castle shows up. Every time the big boss, we got to stand straight in a foul line and all this. Okay. When the opportunity comes for her to have a leadership role, or for her to be in any type of position to so-called help others, she starts having that presence about her by using fear. Okay. You can tell with some of these people that they have definitely been in situations of abuse just by the way they handle things. They handle things like a bully in a schoolyard. They handle things in ways that you are just baffled by. I mean, you're a grown woman. Why are you behaving like this? This is so childish. This is so unprofessional. Why are you having temper tantrums and throwing things around? Because her abuser was throwing things around and having attitudes and being threatening. And so she wants to jump up in people's faces. She wants to show off out in the public. She wants to let people know who's running things because she's been run for years at home. You see? That's why we shouldn't be acting rude and ignorant and strange about these matters that arise with these victims. All we have to do is tie it back to the one who's been using power and control tactics for years. She acts very needy for money. Chances are her husband is being very controlling with finances. She acts very stingy with money. Chances are is that she's learned how to take what little bit she has to try to pay a bunch of things off, or at least pay just enough. And so if she feels that her finances are threatened in any way by those outsiders, then of course she's going to rise up and get overprotective about it, right? Because she's living with somebody who is not generous, who's miserly, who could be a hoarder or what have you, okay? You see, a lot of this power and control that we may witness with people isn't isolated to just that home or just that workplace. It is like a toxic spill. It starts to spread in other areas of people's lives. And this is why I am one who is an advocate for safeguarding yourself around those who are still victims. Yes, we empathize. Yes, we pray for them. Yes, we give them necessary resources. But when we see that the anger is rising up, we see that the demonic is working, we see that they may not even be acknowledging that they are, in fact, victims, we cannot allow ourselves to get mixed up in all of that. And for some of us, it's a trigger to be around certain people who refuse to change, or who are the types who want to show up with the emotional abuse and physical abuse that was put upon them. And some individuals can only be understanding for so long before they're like, wait a minute, you're not going to take on that tone with me. I'm trying to help you. You're not going to come over here talking about you're going to put your hands on me because you don't like what I said. Now, I know that's what you went through with your husband or with your brother or with your father or whoever, but you're not going to be that way with me, you see. And then the victim runs off and says, nobody wants to help me. No, they want to help you. But when you are using the very tactics that are damaging to you on other people, you're not going to get very far in getting help. When your husband or boyfriend or whoever is cussing and fussing and having an attitude with you, you can't go out here in the public and expect people to help you if you're going to be eye rolling, deep sighing, slamming things, cursing, jumping up in people's faces. The very one that should have been in jail a long time ago, who you should have called on, you didn't, and now you end up in jail messing around using the same evil, same abuses on other people. You see, some of these victims are so protective of their abusers that they don't want to tie their attitudes and mannerisms and behaviors to what was done to them. If she's an emotional refrigerator, cold-hearted, cold-blooded, what have you, she learned that type of behavior from that person who she grew up with. She learned that type of behavior in that marriage that was abusive. She learned that type of behavior when she was in the hood hanging out with the kids on the block who said that if you start with that crying and sniffling, we gonna beat you down. You see what I mean? So these learned behaviors that these people have, they end up trying to put that foolishness on people who are trying to help. Once again, safeguard yourself, safeguard yourself. We go to the one true God and we pray once again for these individuals, but we are no fools. We are not to be gullible. We're not to be naive. We're not to play into the guilt trip. Yes, that took place too with the victim. I need you to do this for me. Come on now. You know you're making me feel bad. I mean, come on. I just want you to go out here and do this for me. You see, her abuser, charming her, sweet talking her. I may even say, if you don't do this for me, I'm going to hurt you. Okay? I don't want to have to put my hands on you. And so now she's fearful. Didn't I tell you get this done? Oh, you don't want to do that? You want me to come over there and slap you? Right? Now he's threatening. And then she will use this same behavior with her mother, with her father, with her sisters, brothers, what have you. Certain ones she won't use that behavior because she knows that they got the same type of controlling behaviors and may have even hurt her in the past. That, no, I won't touch that sister, or I won't even act like it with my mother. But this one over here, I know that she's weak. I know that she's the type that wants to appease everybody. So I'll get away with certain things with this person. That's why I mentioned uneducated, people who have low self-esteem, people who have their share of mental weaknesses, illnesses, what have you. And here the controlling one, who's still the victim, shows up trying to bully people, trying to get the upper hand. Her presence is felt when she walks in a room. At least that's what she's hoping for with some people. And some of these people fall for it because why? They are used to it. Some people will say, well, that's just how she is. They'll make excuses. Because you grew up with the victim in your household, you got used to her, and so you give everybody the pass who gets crazy and out of control or what have you. That's just who they are. No, they need some help, okay? Because a lot of times, once again, this abuse trickles onto innocent folk sometimes who can't even defend themselves, like children, like grandchildren. So the grandfather's over there being mouthy with the grandmother, cursing and fussing. The kids pick up on that. They go home and they want to try that with their parents. Uh-oh. And some parents think it's funny when they're little. Until they get older, it's not so funny. Until they start jumping up in your face. Oh, you better go head on somewhere. I'm going to knock your head off. No. Wait a minute. Hold up. You thought it was cute, though, when they were little. You see? This victimization that goes on in these relationships, once again, is not isolated. It is not just over there. If you don't have boundaries established and you still are allowing these people to show up in your household and elsewhere, you will be impacted in some way. You will be influenced in some way. You may even have to check somebody and you didn't want to do it. But now, since we got to go there, I guess we got to go there. I remember a victim ended up being threatened by someone who had also been a victim of an abusive relationship. And the minute the woman started being disrespectful and smart-mouthed, that victim ended up jumping in the face of the victim who had been abused by her husband. Okay, crazy. Meanwhile, witnesses looking at this had been abused in the past. So we got a whole room full of folks that had been either smacked, kicked, choked, shoved by male figures. And these women going at it like males. But the alpha woman, the alpha victim ends up taking control of everybody in the room. Yeah, there is actually alpha victims. They run the show with all the other folks. Well, she got more strength than the rest of us. She's still a victim, though. Her man's still controlling her, but I guess she does have a little clout, you know. So we'll bow down. We'll respect. We'll show allegiance to. You see? Unbelievable settings I have been in and witnessed, as well as listen to people tell me some foolishness that went on with their families. Unbelievable. But I tell you, in the name of Jesus, once again, we give these people over to the one true God. We do not allow ourselves to be wrapped up in all of what the victim is going through. If anything, once again, we direct the victim to the necessary resources. We tell the victim that they are loved. However, there are certain behaviors we will not tolerate, and that if they continue on, we will not help. It's simple as that. But we cannot allow ourselves to be emotionally wrapped up in to all of what is going on with some of these people. This is where I will say that it's okay to have somebody who appears to be quite cold-hearted on your team when you're dealing with victims who are very emotional, because that person is not going to allow themselves to be all teary-eyed and ready to punch somebody and hurt somebody. The cold-hearted, cold-blooded types of individuals that do have to deal with victims, and they're going through their inner work as well, they tend to be those folks that will give them what they need, but at the same time, they are not allowing them to be any doormats to the victims. They're not allowing themselves to be used and abused by anybody either, because they already been there, done it, seen the movie. And that's part of the reason why they are emotionally cold, because they too have been abused, but they're not going to let their emotions get the best of them. You see what I mean? So those that are healing, those that are, working on bettering themselves, but at the same time, they're not as emotional as some of us might be. They are decent people to have on your team when you're dealing with someone who's a victim, who you might have to have an intervention because that person now is on, drugs, or they've been just being real mean spirited to family members, or they're on, or they're abusing alcohol. I mean, there could be a lot going on. And so this intervention takes place, and you want to be that one that has some supportive people around you who are not as passionate as you might be, right? And then, of course, you want to make sure that you are not a victim in your relationship before you go out there trying to help everybody else. Because I will tell you that from personal experience, there were those individuals that were suffering much many years back, and I couldn't do anything for them while I was attending college because I was going through an abusive relationship myself, and it did affect my personality over time. I found myself being bossy. I found myself being controlling. You see, these messages don't fall too far from the tree. Not all, but many of them. And so here I was, I'm like, what is going on with me? And even some people say, you used to be so nice. You used to be so friendly. What's up? And I couldn't tell them. I couldn't tell them that the man that I was supposed to be marrying was doing all these mean things. And so I would just say, oh, it's my period, or, oh, I'm just having a bad day. That's what victims do. They make excuses rather than just deal with the issues and get away from the problems. They just have excuse after excuse. Some of the victims that I witnessed growing up, it was never the man who was controlling them, his fault for anything. It was always everybody else. It was my annoying mother. It was my, needy daughter. It was my crazy making son. It was, bitter Betsy, the family friend. Everybody else but that man that you're living with. Everybody else but that man who is controlling your finances. That's why you stay broke, busted, and disgusted, and you asking everybody for some money. Everybody but those no good kids who are constantly disrespecting, the matriarch or the patriarch of the family. Won't blame them, but will blame the other folks, right? And so we see this sort of thing, and I'm the type of person who will redirect the issues right back on the squares of the people who they should be directed on. And I remember having a conversation once I got older with one of my relatives, and I said that the reason why your children feel like they are like mothers and fathers to you is because you gave them that opportunity to be just like that, and they ran away with it. You should have maintained your position as a mother the whole time. I said, but it's not too late. You can still get your position back by simply telling them, I'm the mother and I make these decisions, and you are not going to have a voice on my personal business, you see. And then the woman was afraid that, well, if I do that, they're not going to come around. They're not going to help me. And I said, well, you've had a history of asking other people for help, haven't you? Sometimes you got to let these kids know that, no, I don't need you. I really don't. I mean, there's support systems out here. I mean, I can make phone calls and what have you. And then some of the smart mouth ones will say, well, go ahead on. Go ahead on. Okay. And then that's just what you do. Because life is too short to have to be that one that's dealing with these people who think that they're powerful and strong. Meanwhile, they're still broken, they're still angry, they're still upset, and they refuse to change. And they refuse to get out of their situations, and they refuse to get help. They just refuse everything, and they don't want to be held accountable to anything either. And that, unfortunately, is why some of them continue to get away with what they get away with, because nobody's holding some of these sassy, tough talking, backstabbing, gossipy type of people accountable for anything. She might look pretty, but her heart's not right. Come on, says the Lord. She might act very innocent, cute with certain people, but yet very bitter and ugly. She's still a victim. There are those individuals who will continue to be this way because, once again, somebody is saying, it's okay, it's all right. Matter of fact, I like you acting this way. And that's not the least bit righteous, to be a sassy talking, net swinging, hair tossing, cursing like a sailor type of individual. Nothing good about that. Well, thank you as always for taking time out of your busy schedule to listen. You've been listening to YouTube NM Enterprise 7. Feel free to like, subscribe, comment, and we do welcome tips. So thank you in advance for those.